Hello and welcome to Opening Bars. Regina Spektor is a Russian-born singer-songwriter and pianist. She began formal piano lessons at age 6 in Moscow and continued into her teenage years upon emigrating to the United States at age 9. Her classical training and subsequent academic work in composition at the Conservatory of Music at Purchase College is evident in the art and craft of her work. As for the title and the French expression Après moi le déluge, which translates to After me, the flood, is said to have been initially uttered by the King of France, Louis XV. According to Wikipedia, the expression has two possible meanings. After me, the deluge will come, asserting that if the French Revolution ended the king's reign, the nation would be plunged into chaos. Or alternatively, after me, let the deluge come, implying, I don't care what happens after I'm gone. One other notable inclusion is a middle verse, which is an excerpt of text from the Russian poet and novelist Boris Pasternak, which translates roughly to, O black spring, pick up your pen and weeping of February in sobs and ink. Let's look at a harmonic reduction then of this piece. We're using the treble and bass clefs for this example and have notated one B flat for a possible key signature of either F major or D minor. The time signature, one that you may not see too often, is 12/8. Why use that one, you might ask? Well, it has to do with the groupings and the primary pulse. I suppose we could have marked this with a more common time signature of 6/8, but as you can see from the Roman numeral analysis, the harmonic movement is extended over multiple beats through chord inversions, so it makes sense to me to show that in the notational score. And based on the harmonic division and the tempo, to me, it has a feel of 2 pulses per overall measure. We can also tell from the analysis and the chord labels that this piece is wholly within the realm of functional harmony, where we see strong movement from the tonic, in this case D minor, to the relative major 6 B flat, setting up an authentic cadence from the E diminished 2 to the A major 5 with the raised 7th degree of the harmonic minor scale, and of course back to D minor 1. As a classically trained musician, this progression is something that would be ingrained in Regina's musical psyche, and provides a compositional effect, I suppose, to possibly evoke a sense of classical repertoire. You might wonder why I've identified measure 2 and measure 3 the way I have. If you simply add the notes vertically, you won't get the same labels that I've notated. This is particularly evident in measure 3, for the second half of the measure only contains a G, B flat, and D, which is a G minor 4 chord in first inversion. But if you take into account what Regina is singing at that moment, which is an E natural, it makes oral sense that the 2 harmony is sonically still relevant, and even though it does not appear in the opening bars. I feel similarly about the measure before it, where even though the B flat does not appear in the second half of the bar, I've mentally retained it in my musical memory, in keeping with an overall harmonic movement that lasts for the 12 eighth notes. This too is more evident in the second repetition of this phrase, when the bass line is slightly expanded to include a second iteration of a B flat in the left hand. We'll see that more clearly in a moment. But in the meantime, let's look at the rhythmic considerations. Now you can see the rhythms and the groupings I spoke of earlier. This eighth note pulse permeates the entire piece from beginning to end, sometimes with an eighth rest to begin, but not always. Even at a moment of rest in the right hand, there is always at least a complementary left hand strike to have a complete continuity of pulse. Let's play that slowly now, hands together, with no pedaling. With the repetition of these measures, as seen here, the octaves in the left hand are eliminated, and now you can see where that B flat is reapplied in the second measure, extending the left hand melody somewhat, so that the sub-mediant 6 harmony is elongated throughout the measure. Let's play this now too, as before. Let's play them both up to tempo now, again, as evenly and strictly as possible. Now that you know all of the notes, let's look at an aspect of technique. One thing you will have noticed is that the left hand is playing the vocal melody, or at least the first part of it, in octaves. This is a great opportunity to play your scales in octaves. Let's play D minor, harmonic, with that raised 7th degree. You should also practice your scales using a variety of dynamics, like perhaps a crescendo on the way up and a decrescendo on the way down. Don't forget to reverse the dynamic flow. Practice a decrescendo on the way up and a crescendo on the way down as well. One of the really fascinating things about Après Moi is the constant drumming of the eighth notes that don't let up for the entire 5 minutes of the piece. The question becomes, how does it remain even interesting? I mean, why doesn't it get boring? Well, I think there are two answers to that question. One is compositional, and the other is performance-based. I think a lot of things happen on the album recording, notably where sections are defined and adjusted with the addition or deletion of other sounds and textures, especially the pitched and non-pitched percussion. I also think that including a snippet of French and that lovely middle verse of Russian poetry, as well as her extemporized vocalizations, really adds novel variety and engagement as well. That's very, very clever. The second would be the performance. I think the primary difficulty is in bringing some regularity and precision to the thumping eighth notes without them becoming robotic and post-human. In a way, each one and each grouping, and perhaps whole sections, should almost have their own personality. I would urge you to listen to Regina's performances, both live and on the album, to get a sense of how she addresses this aspect of her performance. And finally, while I was working on this lesson, I started thinking about those eighth notes. and it reminded me of the musical galloping in Franz Schubert's Lied Erlkönig. I thought about how he approached that piece, compositionally, changing dynamics, textures, vocal registers, and tonal areas, and with its compelling text by Goethe, made for such a memorable and now famous piece. Then I thought, if it had been me writing Après Moi, and with Schubert in mind, I might have considered, instead of just slowing down and simply ending the piece, I might have created a more dramatic pause that mirrored the Erlkönig, and maybe reiterated some of Pasternak's poetry. So, if I mash Regina and Franz together, perhaps we would get this. Erreicht den Hof mit Mühe und Not, in seinen Armen das Kind war tot. I hope you enjoyed your lesson today. Remember, don't just play notes. Make music. Until next time, thanks for listening.